Hey everybody, welcome to Big Boys Toys Productions. Today we are going to talk about the 928 S4. The last time we talked about my burgundy, actually it's called ruby red, 84 928S. This time it's the dark blue 928 S4. Let's do this. As always, thank you for joining me. And as a refresher, the 928 came in 4 distinct body styles. There was the OB, or original body style, and you can see that one right there. That was from 78, model year 78. They came out in 77. Model year 78 to model year 82. Then we had the 928S from model year 83 to 86. Now there was a little bit of overlap with the OB for the European market because the European market got the 928S in 1980. So we were a little late to the party here in the US, but we did finally get it in 83. And then we have the S4 right here. And that went from 87, model year 87, to model year 91. And the final body style of 928 was the GTS. And since my camera is sitting on the GTS, I will just put a picture right here. So you can see my Euro model 92 928 GTS. That ran from 1992 for the European market. We did not get the 92 model in the US market, or the North American market is really how they call it. I want to say there were very few that were actually made for Canada anyway, but they did get a few in Canada of the GTS. And then so it went from 92 to 95. And I will post a picture of my 95 right here, right now. So thank you all for joining me. And as always, like, subscribe, hit the bell notification below. I was looking at the statistics for the channel the other day. 95% of you have not subscribed to the channel. If everybody subscribed to the channel, we'd be doing great. So please, doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. Just hit the button. I appreciate it. Now let's get on with the S4. So let's talk a little bit about the S4 928. Production of the S4 began in 1987 and went through 1991. In 1987 and 88, the antenna for the radio was incorporated in the windshield. 89 and up, in fact, 89 all the way through the end of the run of the 928 with the 95 GTS, had a antenna for the radio on the roof of the car, really almost on the hatch, just ahead of the hatch on the actual roof of the car. That's really the only visual difference that the car had from 87 to 91. There were some changes along the way, however. In 89, a digital dash was introduced, but no airbags. In 90, you got the airbags with the digital dash. In 89, you also received a slightly shorter rear end gearing, which made it accelerate a little bit quicker, just made it a little bit snappier, which actually is a nice upgrade. So what I tell people, if they can only have one 928 and they can't afford a GTS, then get the 89 S4. You get most of the benefits and thrill of a GTS for a third the price. Also, in 89, there was the introduction of the GT, which had slightly different camshafts, added 10 horsepower to the car, making 326 horsepower. At least that's what the book says. Most people say it's more than that. Also, those were pretty rare. The 89 GT is a pretty rare car. So if you find an 89 GT for a decent price, that'd be a car to definitely think about purchasing. For 90 and 91, all of the 5-speed cars were GTs. So you could say they were S4 GTs, and the automatic transmission cars were S4s. So in 90 and 91, if it had an automatic transmission, it was an S4. If it had a 5-speed transmission, it was a GT. Here's the heart of the beast. This is the 88 S4. Now you will notice that that intake is not the right color. Now a friend of mine who was doing 928 intakes for quite a while, he had the equipment to sandblast them and powder coat them and all that good stuff. He owned a 928 of his own, and I guess he had looked at the 85, 86 models, and their organ pipe intakes are about this color. He thought this was the factory color for an S4, but the fact of the matter is that S4 is supposed to have silver intakes and silver cam covers. That said, I certainly don't mind this gold. It looks much better than the flaking silver that had been on it before I had it refinished, and I think it goes reasonably well. It's really dusty, engine bay, and again, I apologize. As usual, it's not one of those places I can reach very well, so it's difficult for me to clean, and thus it's dusty. I've had this car, I was the second owner. I've had this car since 96, as I mentioned in an earlier part of the video while driving. When I got it, there was damage from the original owner somewhere right around here. It was the only problem with the car. The interior was really clean and the car ran really nicely, but they had hit something, and whoever repaired it did a really terrible job. Maybe it was even further over here. Anyway, regardless, it looked terrible. I had the car about a year and I rear-ended somebody, and it was a Mazda MX-6, which is the 2-door coupe little Mazda that they had at the time, late 90s, and it buckled the bumper and folded the trunk, and I thought, oh my God, and there was too much traffic. I couldn't get out of the car in my wheelchair at that where we were stopped on the side of the road. So my wife at the time got out of the car to check, and I was very upset, of course, and it was one of those deals where they had to yield to turn right. They didn't have to stop, and there wasn't any traffic, and they stopped anyway, and I was looking the other direction. When I looked back, they were at a dead stop right in front of me. Anyway, it was definitely my fault, but I was really concerned about the car, and she got back in the car after a minute of talking to them, and she said, you know, your car doesn't look bad at all. It barely looks like it was in an accident. The only thing wrong with it is the fog lights are broken. And I didn't believe her. And we got home and she was right. My car had a few scratches on the bumper cover and a couple of broken fog lights, and that was it. And it folded the back end of that Mazda right up. So I had the front end repainted, front bumper cover, and they fixed the bad spot that the original owners had put on the car. And it looked great, and looks great even to this day. Been a great car. Probably why I ended up with so many 928s overall, because this car just was such a good car for me, has been such a good car for me. Let's look at some more of it. About a year after that front end damage was sustained, my wife, who had been with me at the time of that accident, accidentally at night, one night, with this car parked in the driveway, backed her minivan into the side of this car. She started about 2/3 of the way down the door and proceeded to back on down the door and into the quarter panel. It was fixed very nicely. It was, you know, just cosmetic. But I didn't talk to her for 2 days after that, as most Porsche owners would probably understand. I was quite upset. But anyway, the car got put back together. Still looks great. It's a fantastic car. And I've put these Carrera lightweight. These are not the strongest wheels that Porsche ever built, and I've seen a few 911s come off the racetrack with all 5 spokes broken and the hub rolling around the inside of the rim. So I wouldn't take these to the racetrack, but they're the prettiest rim that I think Porsche has ever built. Now, something that differentiates the S4s from the S's, we can see right here, this car has a little bit longer and more aerodynamic front on it, and it has this little spoiler down here that again helps the airflow around and under the car. On the S cars, which preceded this, you have this little lip spoiler here in the back that's made of rubber. You can see it's flexible. And there's one in the front too. You can just see it sticking out in front of the front wheels from here, front tires from here. It's not that front lip spoiler is not quite as flexible as this one in the back, but I don't particularly love that look. I prefer the longer, more aerodynamic shape of the S4. We'll go to the back of the car and look at the back of this one. Now remember, we've got this little lip spoiler that goes all the way around the back on the S. And let's go look at the wing on the back of the S4. The S4s just took it to a whole next level with a much more aerodynamic nose and tail and a wing that is actually an upside down airfoil. So this actually generates downforce at speeds above, say, about 80 miles an hour. In fact, if you didn't have your hatch fully latched and you took off in this car, when you got up to about 80 miles an hour or so, you'd hear the hatch click as it was pressed down into place. Kind of interesting. And in the 78, the 88 and the 87 models, the antenna for the stereo was integrated into the windshield. Now, if you break the windshield, that's a big problem because it becomes a much more expensive endeavor to replace the windshield that has the antenna in it than a windshield that doesn't. It might be hard to tell, but the exterior of this car is called Dunkelblau, which translates literally to dark blue. The interior is linen and black. I've seen only one other in dark blue with linen and black, but I have seen a few that had linen and dark blue, and I think they called it marine blue. So the parts in this car that are black would be a dark blue in some of the other S4s of this color. But the Dunkelblau is a pretty rare color. You don't see it very often, but you do see it often paired with linen, interestingly enough, which unfortunately is such a light color, it gets dirty really easily. And I have cleaned on these seats and it is just almost impossible to get them as clean as I'd like for them to be. This is an aftermarket center armrest from Paul Champagne. That's also an aftermarket shifter boot cover, also from Paul. Paul re-leather stitched my shifter and he leather covered my wheel again. It was not, the leather had just really given up the ghost, and his work is just impeccable. And I love having his work on all the things that I touch in the car because it gives it a much classier feel. And this aftermarket center armrest, you can see, is much taller than the original. And so it actually is something you can lean on, and it makes it just more comfortable to drive the car great distances. If you're thinking about buying a 928, I would recommend the S4. I think it's the best overall 928 for getting into the 928 model vehicles. It's the best bang for the buck, in my opinion. The engine produces 316 horsepower and 317 pound-feet of torque. We usually just round that up and say 320. And they're pretty quick, pretty fast, and they're still very pretty and elegant looking, in my opinion, and don't look particularly dated. I mean, when people find out that this car is from 1988, they genuinely can't believe it.
Some car guys know because they've followed Porsche for a while and have seen them, but your average person on the street, they wouldn't have a clue. Great looking cars. The 5-speed manual cars are much, much more expensive than the automatic cars. So if you can live with an automatic, you can probably save yourself $10 or $15 or even $20,000. You get about 95% of what a GTS delivers for about a third the price, half the price, probably a third the price really of the GTS. That's how inexpensive the S4s are relative to the last model of the 928 that was built, which is of course the GTS from 92 to 95. In the States, we got them in as 93 model year cars to 95 model year cars.
So I've owned the S4 since 1996. It was my very first Porsche that I ever bought. Not the first Porsche I ever drove. That distinction falls to my Uncle Bob's car. He bought a brand new 1984 911 Carrera Cabriolet back then, and I got to drive that car a fair bit. But this is my first car, my first Porsche that I owned, and I still have it. It's 2021 now, so I've been into the 928 scene for a long time, and this car is still just fantastic. I've probably put 10,000 track miles on this car, and I just love driving it on the track, on the street, anytime I get the opportunity. It's only had a rear muffler bypass installed, so it's not any kind of special exhaust or anything, but the 87 and 88 cars, or maybe it's the 88 and 89 cars, have the smaller resonators, and so it makes a pretty nice noise. Let's listen to it for just a sec as we approach this stoplight. Still pretty fast. This car is pretty old, 88. I mean, that's no spring chicken these days. She's, as the Brits would say, properly quick. She's fast and quick. So not for an 88 car, not for a grand touring style car, but just pretty quick. I mean, by today's standards, not as much. I mean, you have 911 turbos that can do 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds or something like that. It takes 5.5 seconds for this car to hit 60, but that's not bad. And if you think about it, in 1988, a car that hit 60 in 5.5 seconds and could go 170 miles an hour, I mean, there were like 4 other cars that could do that. This car is still a real great performer, even today.
Thanks for joining me today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, as usual, like and subscribe. 95% of the people that view my videos are not subscribed to the channel. If you were, then there's a possibility that I might actually be able to make $5 or $10 a month off the channel. Wouldn't be enough to even put a couple gallons of gas in the car. But hey, it's better than nothing. So please subscribe and join me. Thanks again. All the best. See you soon.